Things were happening while I was writing that just sort of said, okay, you're doing good, Doniga. You're like on, you're onto something, because it feels like when you get into that creative space, then everything just kind of piles up on each other, and you're in that writer's mind and curious observing mind, and it's like you're looking at things. It's kind of like tracking. You're looking at things differently. And I would just, like, every single conversation I would have with someone, it would either spark something, or there would be like a certain phrase that I would say, oh wait, that would that would work really good here, or I would listen to something, or I would go for a walk and see something in nature.
Welcome to episode number 8. I am your host, Sebastian Engstrom, and today Doniga Markegard joins us. She is a tracker, survival specialist. She is a regenerative farmer of grass-fed beef and an author. She is a deeply connected woman who knows her roots, and we go into really what is it that matters. And we specifically talk about this earth, how we can care for it, and how to truly listen to your intuition. There's so many different things that go into this, and how to connect to nature. And I think it's just one mind-blowing episode for me from a learning perspective, and to see the world through her eyes. As high performers, we really have the highest tempo. Probably even frustrated you what I said right there, because we don't like it, take it slow. This is to create space, to give back to yourself, to feel into your heart, to connect with yourself, and give that love and forgiveness to someone else too. You're going to put one hand on your heart, one on your stomach. You're going to do a breathing exercise. Even we'll skip this 3 minutes and 30 seconds ahead. Please don't do this if you're driving. You're going to breathe in. I'm going to say your name. Say I love you. 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out, and I forgive you. And I say level at one person. So 1, 2, 3. Breathe in and say your name. I love you. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. I forgive you in your name. In. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. Now, you can imagine one person in front of you. This person is going to be having the day of their life. They are thriving. They are inspired. They are on top of a mountain because they feel like they are one with everything. Everything they've ever one that is coming their way, and they're helping people because they are in abundance. Their cup is filled. They're giving, and they're laughing. They're so happy because for the first time in their life, they've let go of everything that's happened. They feel the joy beaming in them, through them, and everyone else around them is being brought up by them. You see them laughing, and people laughing around you, and them. Because we're all connected, we're all one. What happens to you happens to me. You are loved, you are forgiven, you are cared for, and so are them. and everyone else around them. Because we are all one. We are all one. Okay, Doniga, we are live, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast. Thank you for coming on board. So what we just did, it brought back memories from when we were invited to your farm, and we had a beautiful dinner that you hosted, and it's for anyone, let me just describe my experience. It truly feels like you're coming into the wilderness when you step on your farm. Everything is, it's very authentic. And that's how I can tell that when I don't feel in control, when I feel like I am part of something greater, and that my existence is not as significant as, you can say, my ego likes to think, that's when I truly know, wow, I'm truly in the wild. And even so, your ranch being located on the coast of here, Northern California, Pescadero, close to San Francisco and San Jose, for those who are not familiar with California. The ranch is going into the house. It feels like a home, and you get greeted by very friendly, authentic, kind people. And the meal was just incredible. And Doniga being an incredible chef, but what I'm getting to is I believe it was indigenous sayings before the meal. It was gratitude of some sort. Do you mind going into what the origins is of that and the practice?
Yeah, so our family gathers around the meal table every evening, and that's something it's really important for us to share food together that's raised and grown nearby. And I feel like it's not just we're not just feeding ourselves with that nutrition and that food, but we're also feeding our spirits by sitting around and engaging with one another, and taking in that food is sort of a sacred act for us. And so we start each meal with the 7 sacred attributes that I learned from my adopted father, Gilbert Walking Bull. And these attributes are, they're basically how he would describe a whole human being living on this earth, connected to themselves, connected to the sacred silence and the spirit, and fully living their purpose. So my daughter Quill is usually the one to recite those, and it's just brings us all together, and giving thanks for the meal and for just life.
It's incredibly connecting. Do you mind sharing those? Are they top of mind that you can recite?
Oh yeah, yeah. They're actually just right in this book here as well. So just so I don't get turned around, I can. Here we go. I turned right to the page. Okay, so the first one is Wowahwaka, and that is sacred silence or inner tranquility. So, and that's the first one because we always want to be coming from a place of that peacefulness inside before we do anything, really, before we speak to one another, before we go about our day or our work, is start with that inner quietness. The second one is Wochanto Knake. And that one is Chante is heart, and Gnake is those who you place in your heart. So Wochanto Gnake is those, and this is for people. So those people that are close to you, your family, your relatives, that and your close friends that you hold in your heart, that you have love and compassion for people. And that's something that we need to practice every day, because sometimes that's part of the difficulty. Here, let me just start over there. So that's something we need to practice every day. And sometimes that's part of the difficulty is, we don't want to have hatred inside of us for anyone. So we need to work on that love and compassion for people. And then the third one is Wowa Unshila. And this one is similar to Wochanto Gnake, but it's extended to all creation. So all life, the grasses outside your door, the trees, the birds, that we are in relationship with nature and everything that's supporting us, and we're in this reciprocal relationship with. So that is really, really important to remember, and that's part of why at the beginning of each meal, we say thank you to all of these elements, and we say thank you to the food that we are blessed to eat, because it's important to remember to say thank you to all of these life forms that we're in relationship with. And then the fourth one is Wowa Wokie. And this one is, so when you have that sacred silence, and you have that deep love and care for not only the people that are in your life, but of all creation, that you use that feeling and you help those in need. So this is really, how Gilbert explained is like, you need to make yourself useful. Don't just sit around and wait for a messiah to come along and fix things. It's like, it's up to you. It's up to each person to make themselves useful and do something, like actually, help people in need, help elderly people, help the children, see who needs that extra boost. So it's not enough to just kind of say, oh, I'm really sorry for your situation, or kind of grieve for your loss, but you got to actually take action and do something. And this is also part of fulfilling a purpose in life. So fulfilling something that you feel strongly about in your heart. The fifth principle is Woblihecha, and that's that feeling of being fully alive. It's sort of like, when you jump in a body of cold water and your whole body is just tingling with aliveness, and it's just that feeling of being fully alive and in the moment. Woblihecha. And then the sixth principle is Woyuski, and that one is a joy of a child. So you think about a toddler, like your daughter, cruising around, like how she can just be so excited about something and curious, and just that childlike joy that only comes about when you're just in the moment and immersed in your senses and curious about what is going on around you. So developing that Woyuski. And then the seventh is when it sort of all comes together. We chose Ani, which is health, is the state of health of mind, body, and spirit. So when I talk about health, it's sort of, we need to look at developing not just our physical health, but also our mental health and our spiritual health, which can, bring in emotional health. And so that seventh sacred principle is sort of when you have that health of mind, body, and spirit really aligned. So it's like these 7 principles that were taught to my father Gilbert and were passed down to him from his grandparents, is basically what we're looking at achieving in life. So yeah, that's what we say, and that's what, when you joined us at the dinner table, that's what we said before our meal.
I'm stunned by how deep that message is, and just how it resonates, and how it's all so succinct. It was beautiful. We do gratitude before every meal too, where we thank every part of the meal, so from the meat to where it came from, and a cow that gave its life, and the vegetables, and the farmers who took care of the food, and the origins, and water, and all the natural elements, and then go into you can say a Reiki practice with putting our hands over the food, and maybe absorb and digest, and truly take in all the nutrients, and may it flourish, and truly energize our bodies and heal our bodies. And then we go into our daughter does kind thoughts, kind heart, kind thoughts, kind words, kind heart, and then she does it in Swedish snälla tankar, snälla ord, snällt hjärta. And but this is way more connecting what you're doing. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, any sort of ritual like that, I mean, that's so important. And people need to just create their own. They don't need to, something that's close to their heart, and they feel like, because the important part is that you feel connected with that, right? It's in your own native language, and it's something that you're passing on to your daughter. And so that's something unique and special for your family. And so I think that's that's really important, that it has that connection and that meaning for you. And anyone can basically just simple acts of thankfulness, and then it sort of becomes their own ceremony, which is great.
Yeah. And I have what you're showing, so Dawn again here, so I'm gonna, now I know exactly, I'm gonna use the book, and we're gonna start reciting that as well. So but it truly, what comes across when you're saying all of this is practical wisdom. And I've been going deep into Greek philosophy as of late, and that is one thing that they speak of, especially Stoicism, is practical wisdom. It's one thing to know it theoretically, and it's one thing to know it in your mind, but the main thing is how do you put it into practice. Actions speak louder than words. And that's saying, and I think you and your entire family, I mean, you're putting things into actions. You speak to a very incredible message, but you truly put in the work too. And it was one when we watched the premiere of Kiss the Ground, which you and your family are an integral part of, which can be found on Netflix. So in Kiss the Ground, there's regenerative farming, and there are a lot of it's a concept that I didn't know of, and we'll go into this in a little bit. But I'd love to hear you speak about regenerative farming, what it actually is. To me, it was only clear what sustainability is, and that is a concept that a lot of people are aware of. And also, for example, for a few years ago, I wasn't completely sure what was the difference between organic, grass-fed. It was all these labels, and I'm like, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
I think I eat healthy, and that's enough. I have a good what I've seen on the plate that all the authorities are putting out. While I'm following that, I thought no, I knew what healthy was, but going into regenerative farming, and there are a lot of NGOs, so a lot of foundations who support regenerative farmers, and it's such a clear statement that hit home. You said, well, I wish there were more actual farmers and practitioners. There are more NGOs and more foundations supporting us than actually are farmers out there, and we need more farmers. And even speaking to Sue, who is an integral part of Markegards and the farm, she said, yeah, there's a lot of people who talk a lot and like to talk a lot and support, and that's amazing. And the message needs to be spread, but we also need to put it into action. And that is one of the main things that I think needs to come across more, is that yes, we need to unite around a message, but also how do we take action? And sometimes it's uncomfortable. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be early mornings. It's going to be cold days. It's going to be doing the dirty work. And you and your family truly do that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Going into we can actually speak about regenerative farming and sustainability. And maybe by starting, Markegards is the name of your family, or that is your last name, but it's also the family farm. What is it that you do? Do you mind going into that?
Yeah. So Markegard Family Grass-Fed, we produce nutrient-dense meats through regenerative agriculture practices that build soil, sequester carbon, and create more life with every life that is taken. And that life is in the form of the biodiversity that we find on our ranch lands, including birds, plants, soil, microbes, sort of all the way into how those animals are raised, and the health of those animals is all very intentional. And so the result is really good grass-fed meats. That's animals that are eating their natural diet. So the cattle and the sheep are only eating the forage, and pigs and chickens have access to good pasture their whole life. So it's not just a dirt area, but it's we move them every day, and we put them on fresh pasture so that they can scratch around and eat bugs. And so we sell beef, lamb, pork, and chicken at farmers markets in the Bay Area and through our online shop. We don't ship, but if you're in the Bay Area, you can get our meats.
And the first time we met and came across the Markegards was at a farmer's market, and we have our roots, so my wife and I, Sophia, in, you can say, biohacking. Is really how do you up level your performance, and how do you enhance your life in multiple different ways. And as so many people in the tech industry, they're trying to always get the next edge, and more and more of it is coming back to just ancient practiced wisdom that the natives have, for example, or bringing it back to the very origins of what we used to do, instead of just trying to make everything as fast as possible, and to use any method possible to produce as much as possible. That has consequences, and we're now seeing that in our environment, and just across the board. Part of it is also with COVID, with our mental health. We're not really sure what to do with a new life now that we're just bombarded with you can say notifications and a life of, you can say, internet in a new way.
Yeah.
With the biohacking approach and with what you're doing, it really came down to you're local, and you have exceptional meat and exceptional practices, and you take care of your animals in such a beautiful way. For people who don't know the differences between what is regenerative farming, and what is pasture-raised meat and grass-fed meat, and what does the meat market look like right now, and what is it that makes it so special? I know it makes us feel phenomenal, and we can taste the difference, right?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, grass-fed meats are so we're certified by the American Grass-Fed Association, and that's for ruminant animals. So animals that only get their diet from, grass and the forages in the pasture. So that means that they're never fed grains. So that can be for cattle or for sheep. Whereas chickens and pigs will require some other protein in order to have enough to grow. So 100% grass-fed meats is applies to those ruminant animals, and it's not being done at a very large scale. There's only about 2% of the cattle in the U.S. are grass-fed and grass-finished. It should be 100%, because I think like one thing that when we really sort of look into our heart and sort of feel the energetics of the food, we want to be producing and consuming food that's ethically raised and not just clean and healthy, but also ethically, that animal did not have to suffer throughout their lives, because that transfers into the meat. And if animals are finished in a feedlot in confinement, those animals are suffering because they're not being fed a natural diet. It's sort of like, how can you fatten an animal really fast to get it to the weight you need to be profitable? So that is really how that system was set up, is purely based on profit and efficiency, and not taking into consideration anything to do with the environment, anything to do with the health of the animals. So those animals, when they are in that setting, they are incredibly unhealthy. And because they're not being fed a natural diet. It's sort of like, what happens if people sit on their couch all day long and eat potato chips? What would happen versus somebody that, is eating really healthy, good organic foods and moving a lot and exercising. And so that's sort of the difference there. And it's not being done at the scale that we really need it to be done right now with the just with the climate crisis we're facing. Because when a lot of people look at the impact of cattle on a landscape or in the environment, the data and the statistics they're looking at are based on those animals that were raised in a feedlot. They're not looking at all of the benefits that cattle have when they're raised out on grass. And so that's fairly new, a lot of this research and data, but it's really astounding, some of the results that will come back from, say, our soil studies, that we're actually drawing down massive amounts of carbon because we're moving the animals very intentionally, mimicking the large herds of grazing animals that evolved with these grasslands, like the elk and like the antelope. grasslands evolved with grazing livestock. So when you remove those grazing animals, then the plants actually suffer. And when the plants suffer, the soil suffers, and it actually releases carbon when it doesn't have that disturbance of that herd. I mean, it's you can sort of simplify it and say we're just mimicking nature and how nature functions, and that is where we want to be heading because nature has these solutions. Or you can sort of get down into the science of what's actually happening with the grass plant and the photosynthesis. But essentially what we're doing is we're working on having more energy, more solar energy pulled down through photosynthesis down and through the roots of those plants to pull that carbon down.
What struck me when watching Kiss the Ground was specifically a farmer in, what was it, Wyoming?
South Dakota?
South Dakota could have been.
Or yeah. North Dakota.
North Dakota, yes. Yeah. And he was at one point doing mono agriculture, so just one specific crop. And when you do that, you take away a lot of the biodiversity, and he was using heavy pesticide, herbicides, whatever it is, to be as profitable as possible. Due to natural circumstances, hail, and other reasons, he was suffering several years from not being able to be profitable at all. He was in debt, and he needed to figure out a new way of doing it. Yeah. And what was so fascinating to me that I was not aware of before, of how the biodiversity that occurs when you introduce several different crops, but also introduce animals to the lands, and how it all works in harmony, and how a majority of all lands in the United States that are farmland is monocrop. It's just one crop. And then the United States government is supporting them with additional money to produce this. It's a system that needs to be brought awareness to. But why I'm bringing this up is what comes to mind for me, and I've heard before, how do you scale? How do you scale the grass-fed? How do you scale the organic? And there is really a way. Do you mind speaking to that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, there is a way, but it can't just be left up to the farmers to do that because of the way industrial agriculture is so entrenched in our government policy. And farmers have sort of become, not on, we can't just say, oh, the farmers are bad. Like, I don't like to put that energy out. A lot of people say, oh yeah, what that farmer is doing is bad for the land and it's killing the land. It's like, no, that's not coming from a place of understanding and compassion. They were put into this really horrible sort of box and many of them were born into it. It was what their parents did, and they don't see a way out of it. And the risk is too big for farmers to make this transition. They are entrenched in government subsidies. They're dependent on the chemical companies. I visited some rural areas in Kansas just a few months ago, and rural America is struggling. There was no kids playing outside. The schools were shut down, businesses boarded up, and the only viable happening in the town was the grain mills, where these farmers would come and drop their grain, and right next door was where they would pick up their chemicals. And that was the only business in operation in this one particular town I visited. Every other shop was boarded up. There was no grocery stores. There was the schools were shut, there wasn't enough kids. So it's really, really a dire situation, and it's not gonna just take, you know, a group of farmers saying, okay, I'm going to take the risk and not make any money for the first few years because I've, you know, for generations, we've just cooked our soil and do this regenerative thing. It's like, no, they need to feed their families, right? They need to make their loan payments. So it's going to take large corporations, it's going to take government funding, it's going to take a huge effort to transition industrial farms to regenerative farms. And, you know, I'm working on that with a number of different groups. I wish it was going faster. I wish it wasn't just Zoom calls and meetings. Like I want to have my boots on the ground. And get out there into these communities and really do the work. But it's going to take a lot more than what we've been doing to really scale regenerative agriculture. And it's based on, you know, sort of generations and generations of really abusing the land.
So my father's family, they're all farmers, and I can very much relate to what you're speaking of, and the key word being compassion. Is they're all the farmers, the majority of them, they're just trying to do what is right for their family. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to get by, and it's usually seen as a big risk. And how do you make it work when everyone else around you, and you've been taught that you can't make a profit doing organic farming or sustainable farming, or even the word that some people don't even know, regenerative farming. Yeah. So how do you, it's getting awareness on a larger scale. And I know that is, it's no longer in operations, the family farm, but that is adopted, like everyone else on the island where I grew up, Gotland, is pesticides, but it's turning. So in Sweden, it's less and less pesticides are being used, and it's very much in the forefront. They never really accepted antibiotics for the cows or any of the cattle in Sweden. So it's a very positive thing on that end. When it comes to regenerative farming, you spoke about it a little bit. Do you mind going into what is the difference between regenerative farming specifically and regular farming or sustainability?
Yeah, so you can have an organic carrot, say, and yes, that carrot was not grown with pesticides. However, that carrot could be grown in soil that is devoid of life, that doesn't have any life in it. And it could be part of the problem of soil erosion. And so it's not enough just to do organic. We need to then add regenerative practices on top of those basic organic practices. So that means that we need to implement practices that help build healthy soils. So there's essentially, a number of practices that fall under regenerative agriculture. And, one is minimal tillage or no tillage, so that's great for grass-fed animals because we're not out there on a tractor tilling the soil. So it's sort of like, in this country, we didn't learn it during the Dust Bowl when, that led to the Great Depression. We're still tilling the soil. We're still using these large tractors and turning that soil, which it then blows away, it erodes, and it causes that exposure and releases carbon. It's like a huge carbon release when you till. So minimal tillage is one. You want to, plant perennial plants or enhance those perennial plants. You want to have green living plants 365 days of the year. So that's where you're looking at diversity. So you don't just grow one plant that stays green for a certain time of year. You grow multiple plants so that you always have that solar collection. They're always photosynthesizing. And then another principle is the biodiversity. So having biodiversity above ground and below ground, and that biodiversity above ground, having as many different plants on your land as possible. That means all the roots are going to be different, and they're going to be exchanging things differently. Aiming for healthy soils. So that's like your big indicator is healthy soils. And then the thing that I like to add is movement. We move, like regenerative agriculture. As a rancher, I move my body, and then I move my animals. They're never in one area too long, or else they'll overgraze the plants, and that's not healthy for the plants. So we move the animals, and then the animals in turn move the plants, and then the plants move the soil. And that is following how, ecologically, how nature functions. There's no intact ecological natural system that's devoid of animals, right? They all have animals integral to the system, and they have predators, and they have prey, and they have insects, and they have all of these interacting creatures that are sort of in a dance with each other. So the predators move the prey, and then that in turn impacts how the plants grow. Because if there's no predators, the prey species are going to kind of loaf around in the riparian or the creek areas, and they're going to graze all of those plants heavy and not graze like way up on the mountaintop. And so those plants down by the water will suffer. So then what happens is then all life suffers. So when the predators are moving those prey species, and they're not as comfortable, they're needing to be moved, then what you see is songbirds come back, beavers come back, like these keystone species that are really integral to the whole ecosystem, to the hydration, to the ability of the water to soak into the soil, for the minerals to function, for all life to really be healthy.
So you're stepping into and speaking to an area that really shines through in your books, and that is the love of nature and love of fauna, love of animals. And you are an animal tracker, which I find is highly fascinating. It's truly tapping into instinct, intuition. It's also a skill. I was introduced to it via a podcast, more so in depth, with a gentleman named Boyd Vardy. He is a lion tracker. He runs safaris in South Africa, and the magic that goes into it, and the ability to connect with it's more than just your natural senses. It's also vibration and a deep knowing inside, and connecting to nature that gives you these clues, and how he applied it to life. Of one can say, Rumi says, listen to that voice that doesn't use words. And it's something I've been practicing more of. How do you not use your mind to reason and use logic to find all the next steps, but it's truly starting to listen to your own truth and things that do come up, like you were referencing. You reference your dreams at times. You do it in a book and something comes up. Do you mind speaking to how did you come into that path, and what were the origins from that? I know wilderness school was part of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that a big piece of it is that tracking is looking at your potential and how we can immerse our senses and connect with nature and utilize parts of our brain that we typically don't utilize in a modern setting. So, I mean, there's tracking for like a practical sense when it comes to if you're hunting or if you're gathering data, which is mainly what I did, was research of animals. But then there's like the development of the whole human being, like how we started out with the 7 sacred attributes. And tracking is an excellent pathway to get to discovering those pathways within your brain and within your being of connection. And so if you look at sort of the way, if you've ever spent time with indigenous trackers, then it's like they have this heightened sense of awareness and connection to not only their own bodies, but everything around them. And they're able to pick up on very subtle cues that, those of us who were raised in a modern setting, very dominant on our vision, and especially now with all the screen time, it's like those parts of our being have not been developed in the way trackers have been, indigenous trackers have been raised with that. So, it's almost like when you're tracking with these, it's like there's a sense of magic about it, because they're picking up on things and following things that you can't perceive. And so it's it's almost like that they're following these spirit trails or something. Is you're like, whoa, what are you looking at? How are you finding the sign of this animal? And so for me, a lot of what tracking was about was just sort of developing that sense of being a whole human being and reaching my full potential of utilizing different parts of my brain and connecting to all of my senses and really tapping into that sixth sense. So when all those senses are engaged, it's, you get this sort of intuition where you get like this gut feeling that the animal's this way, or you need to go this direction. And so I think that that is what really hooked me on tracking, was that ability to kind of tap into parts of myself that I hadn't tapped into, in any other sort of training or way of kind of being in nature.
This has come forth too in the 2 books that you have. Do you mind speaking to what made you feel called to write these 2 books? I think you have an incredible dynamic as a family dynamic where you're very hands-on and you're very practical, especially with your husband, Eric, and you are an incredible creative being as well. You have an incredible presence in society and a way to articulate yourself in words. And this has been now taken form in 2 books. Yeah, do you mind speaking to how did that come about and what are they about?
Yeah, so they actually came about because of tracking. I was telling a tracking story. It's one that I wrote in the book about tracking an alpha wolf in the middle of the wilderness in Idaho, and I was telling that story on a podcast, and a publisher happened to be listening to the podcast, and that really piqued her interest, because the podcast was supposed to be it was on farming, and interviewing me on the ranch, but the person interviewing was really interested in some of my tracking experiences. So then this publisher contacted me and said, there's no book out there written by a woman who's actually sort of lived this way and then integrated those experiences that she had in nature with her current life or current career. So so many parents sort of question, like, how, what is the best way to raise my kids? What should they have access to? What kind of influences should they have? And I think that, many are looking at these different nature programs and saying, maybe the classroom setting isn't doing well for that whole development of that whole human being. But then it's like you question, like, oh, then how are they going to turn out? Like, am I really, setting them up for the future? And so, she was looking at it like, oh, well, this was someone who completely rebelled from the status quo and left school at a young age and just went full immersion into the wilderness. It's like 100% my education. And she turned out okay. So that's sort of how my first book came about. And, of course, I had always sort of thought in my head, like, you have these ideas like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book about how we ranch and, regenerative agriculture, and this is what you do. And then it's like, oh, well, no, that book has kind of been written, and I always get really bored and fall asleep when I read like how-to books or technique books. It's like, no, that's not who I am. I like to learn in stories, and I like to tell stories. And so that began the year-long process of going through my life and writing this memoir through stories. And then it sort of wraps up with being on the ranch and family and integrating that into regenerative agriculture. But then it goes a lot into my time when I was a teenager, and sort of these rites of passage experiences. So we looked at that and said, oh gosh, we could make this into a young adult book. And it was during the time of the when the youth activist movements. I mean, yes, that's something that I really want to give to this incredible youth climate activist movement, is this book where they can read it and they can say, oh, I can look for solutions to the climate crisis by connecting with nature. And I don't need to be stuck in this sort of depression cycle of, we sort of got thrown the really, a really crappy future here by our parents and grandparents' generation and how they treated the earth, and we're really stuck with it. And they can then have some hope and say, okay, there are solutions, and these are the kinds of things that we can learn from. And because that sort of was my gift to that climate movement was connect with yourself through connecting with nature and find that sort of inner peace, and then come from that place of inner peace and hit the streets and take action and create things and grow things and keep that movement going, but center that and center yourself in that connection with nature.
Mm-hmm. So the first book was Dawn Again, for those who are listening.
And the second book is Wolf Girl.
Yeah.
See if I have a copy somewhere around. I can grab one.
Is there anything you'd like to add in addition to how Wolf Girl came about and why you felt like there needs to be a second book coming out? And is there another one maybe coming out as well?
Not right now. I sort of, this year, of course, like everybody, is not what any of us expected. So, but I do have a lot of thoughts for my next book, and it's ruminating right now, just trying to figure out exactly which direction I'm going to take it. So, but yeah, with Wolf Girl, it was really just, the opportunity to speak to the youth that are right in that sort of transition time in their life and discovering what their path is.
Yeah. There's an experience for every writer, and especially you being so hands-on usually in your craft. What was that experience like to write these two books? And also you recorded the audiobook for both too, right?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, the writing was a journey. It was it was really intense. And I'm glad that I gave myself 1 year to do it and set deadlines and didn't sort of keep it going, because it was a tough year, full of a lot of sort of internal growth, and also kind of reliving, the past and dredging things up and having to process through that, and kind of hold down the ranch business at the same time and be a mom. So it was a tough year, but really, really worth it. Really rewarding. My creative time is early in the morning. So I wrote it from the hours of 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning. And from there I went, and then I would, go out and do chores and milk the cow and move the cows. That worked for me, to really have that time of quiet. It's like that time where I feel like I'm really connecting with the spirit, is that like pre-dawn time. And it was neat because I'd be writing a story about a coyote or something would come up, and then I'd go out and do chores and I'd see a coyote. So, things were happening while I was writing that just sort of said, okay, you're doing good, Doniga. You're like on, you're onto something, because it feels like when you get into that creative space, then everything just kind of piles up on each other, and you're in that writer's mind and curious observing mind, and it's like you're looking at things. It's kind of like tracking. You're looking at things differently. And I would just, like, every single conversation I would have with someone, it would either spark something, or there would be like a certain phrase that I would say, oh wait, that would that would work really good here, or I would listen to something, or I would go for a walk and see something in nature, and it was really incredible. It was like this full year of kind of creative synchronicity, where I felt like there was many different things speaking to me. And I'm not sure how to describe it, but after I wrote my first book, I read two books that sort of reaffirmed what I'm trying to explain, and they explain it a little better. One is called Bird by Bird. I think it's Anne Lamott. And she's a writer, and it's a book about writing. And the next is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Those two books, if anybody's, well, even if you're not interested in writing, even if you're just interested in creative anything or like trying to find creativity. Those two books are really excellent. And it was like, when I read those, like, oh yeah, that was it. I had that same experience. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I've heard that, and I'm experiencing that myself. When you're in a creative process and you're putting forth something that you've experienced yourself, and then all of a sudden you are reliving your past, and yeah, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
And it takes up a lot of energy. But then you get in the zone, and it's almost a
Yeah.
mesmerizing zone when you're drawing all these things to you.
It is a zone for sure.
Yeah, you can call it synchronicity, and I completely relate to that. 4 to 7. Right now, it's my time with Athena to sleep and also to be with her. That's our morning routine, and that's Sophia, so my wife. That's her time, and it's just that's the way of family life sometimes. But with now that you're in a different stage, that you have 2 books, how do you feel? Do you still connect back to that state, or what is the state that you're in right now? What with everything going on from COVID and a different reality, what is the state that you're in right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of my energy kind of matches the seasons. So I think, like, there was a big shift for us and for our ranch, like just in the last few weeks, because we kind of came out of, a really busy time. We went through an entire like solid month of dealing with the crisis of the wildfires. And that was, exhausting, no sleep. And, I just recently looked at a picture of myself right after that somebody took. And I'm like, who is that? That's not me. Because you could see, like, in my face, it almost looked like I had aged 10 years. And it's like, oh yeah, that was the fires that, created that. And so it's like, wow, that was intense. That was our first experience as a family, really living through crisis like that. So, the state I feel like right now is, after it took a while, it took at least another month to kind of recover from that and be able to, not wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. And now I'm just feeling like, I'm just really enjoying every moment. I'm enjoying, just being out with the kids. I'm enjoying having the kids here and not taking them to school. I'm just, our production side is slowing down. We just took our last batch of chickens in, so there's not like this go, we got to get all this stuff done. So it's more of like, okay, what can we really create? How can we catch up on things? And it's, I'm taking really long walks in the dark at night. So instead of sitting in front of a computer screen typing at 4 a.m., I'm usually out the door by 5 a.m. and I just take these really long walks in the dark, which is so good. It's like taking a long walk in the morning. And instead of getting on the computer screen in the morning, it's like your whole day, you can just kind of anchor yourself to that long walk. Like, wow, things are stressful during the day. I've got to get these things done. I've got to do this or that. But that walk this morning was just, so amazing, looking at the moon and the stars. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And that is what I told a good friend of mine. I keep on telling him that nature is my church.
Yeah.
And it's such a, it's connecting beyond words. And just how every time I go out into nature, it just grounds me instantly. And I start realizing what is mine, what is not. And just come back to a place of calm and tranquility and just knowing and peace, and it's incredible. And as you speak that, and that comes through you as you speak to it too. And I think that it really shows in everything that you put out there, and how you're living your life as a tracker too. And I think it's a great depiction of what you were saying with the family ranch, and how you felt like, okay, well, I should write a book about ranching or agriculture or regenerative farming, but no, you follow that inner voice and that truth to you, and 2 other books came out. And I think it's such a beautiful example how you mix the practical side of truly speaking to truth, but also acting on the truth. And the way you're bringing, I think that is a key piece that we have spoken about, that I think is a good way of closing it, how you're bringing people together and how you bring in awareness. And it's not just for people, for regular people, and how to eat and how to consume and how to be in this world, but also to farmers, and also the battle that sometimes can be seen of vegans and vegetarians and people who eat meat. And so the Kiss the Ground movie documentary, I recommend it highly for anyone who hasn't seen it. Brings together that as a beautiful message, because the executive producer is a vegan, or at least a vegetarian, and he started Cafe Gratitude, and for those who don't know, is a very popular restaurant here in at least LA and in San Francisco. So that is one way I know people can find you and more about what Markegard is. But what are other ways that people can connect with you and the Markegards?
Yeah, through my books and through our website, markegardfamily.com. And if you sign up on our newsletter, then you'll receive any updates that we might have. And usually in normal years where we have a lot of events like ranch days or farm dinners, but now it's more, I'll announce, like if I have a virtual conference or some sort of something that's happening even globally. So I'd encourage you to just stay in touch through our main markegardfamily.com website or Instagram. On Instagram, my Instagram is just like my book, Dawn, DAWN .again. So that's my Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, just stay in touch, send me a message, and good luck with finding your own magic.
Thank you incredibly much, Doniga, for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. It was fun.
Doniga truly helps me want to connect with this earth in a whole different way, and to give back, and to care for it, and to spend more time in nature, and to truly be grateful for the animals and everything living. It's so easily take for granted. And to be the change I want to see in this world. And one of the biggest things is you vote with your dollar. You can make this change. You can choose where you buy your produce from, and it will get back to you because you will feel the difference. Wow. Can I say that has made a big difference in my life and how I show up in this world. So if you want to connect with Doniga and the book Dawn Again and anything that she's producing, you can find all the links in the show notes. I'm sending you so much love, and thank you for tuning in.